On to another matchup. This one between two unranked teams in the Big Ten. Northwestern at Maryland. Haslam makes this Maryland -3. I actually have it. This is probably, if this one opens under a full possession, Justin, probably my biggest edge of the games we're discussing. I make it closer to Maryland -4.5, -5. And want to dig into some numbers, and I'll do that in a moment after you go. But one thing about Maryland, when you think about, they're not only one of the unluckiest teams in the Big Ten, but arguably the unluckiest team in college basketball. 1-9 in games decided by 5 points, so 2 possessions or fewer this season. One of those losses coming at Northwestern in January, so a bit of a revenge spot for the Terps. They rank number 348th in three-point percentage, highest turnover rate in Big Ten play. So you would maybe expect a team to struggle in a 1 or 2 possession game when those 2 variables aren't going your way. What do you make of this one?
Yeah, this is a really, really interesting game. Northwestern has been kind of a powerhouse. I mean, like you said, Maryland a little unlucky, but I've liked this Northwestern team as a team to just be betting on. Sitting here, you know, what's their ATS record like 15-12, not exactly powerhouse, but still a lot of green recently, covering 4 of their last 5. I think 7 of their last 9. So yeah, kind of all getting those wins against the spread recently. Has felt pretty reliable in terms of just beating market expectations. Shot quality is going to have this one with you, Eli. 4.7 to be exact. So call it 5. This should be a fun matchup for these teams. Northwestern has been very stingy with the ball, and Maryland's going to be, I think, a team that maybe challenges that, especially at home. They do have a decent forced turnover rate in terms of what they can do on defense, force some tough shots, top 7 percentile in terms of defensive shot selection allowed, have faced some good shot making. So I think like that speaks to your point of how unlucky they are. Teams have come in and shot at a top 20 percentile, like luckiness shot making ability rate. So teams actually coming in and hitting some tough shots against them, maybe a little bit leading towards some perception that they aren't as good as they might actually be. They limit open threes on defense. They're really good at getting to the free throw line. So I think for a home team, that's what you really do want to see. So they're going to get those fouls. They're going to get those good looking points at the line there. And everything else kind of stacks up. Their real, I guess, issue in terms of what their offense brings is probably ending up in too many isolation possessions. So especially when you slow it down like Maryland does, it can get a little bit sticky. But Northwestern, they should give Maryland every chance to get a nice win here. They're also slow, so I would expect this number to open pretty low. Like, the shot quality projection right now is 131. So expect a low total, expect a rock fight, and maybe even consider still going under just because of the way some of these possessions are just bound to end up with isolation, turnaround, mid-range jumpers.
Yeah, Maryland coming off of that blowout win at Rutgers, but I think the total still was around in the low 110 range in terms of the combined points between the two teams.
Rare these days, man, with how the offense looks across college basketball. But yeah, it's still the Big Ten.
Right. And one other thing to the point that you brought up about Northwestern covering so much of late, over the last 10 games, so one game kind of stretching it out one game further, because you mentioned 7-2 ATS in their last 9. Road loss at Nebraska, and Nebraska is a powerhouse at home. If the national championship game was played in Lincoln, I'm pretty sure Nebraska would win the national title. You have an overtime win over Illinois at home. That was Terrence Shannon's first game back. Honestly, probably a little lucky to get into overtime in that one. A home win against a Chris Holtmann-led Ohio State team that is playing better under Jake Diebler, like we saw in that upset win at Michigan State over the weekend. Overtime losses at Purdue, at Minnesota. Kind of fortunate to get to both of those overtime statures in that regard. And then home wins, a home win against Nebraska. Like I mentioned, Nebraska much different on the road versus at home. A road loss at Rutgers, not a good Scarlet Knights team. No. Road win at Indiana, not even close to a good Hoosiers team. And then a home win against Michigan that had 2 key injuries and no Doug McDaniel. kind of gave Purdue some fits in the first half on Sunday, even though I think the Boilermakers wound up covering the spread, or it was pretty tight. Also, Ty Berry out for the season, their best three-point shooter, arguably their best defender, or at least around the arc. And a couple of the reasons why I like Maryland, really, really good pick-and-roll defense, which is what Boo Buie relies on. And Maryland also, I mean, overall atop the number one defensive efficiency in Big Ten play. But Northwestern's opponents rank in the 89th percentile in offensive rebounding rate. And like you mentioned, Maryland, a really good team at getting to the line because they generate a lot of second chance shots. Julian Reese and Jordan Geronimo, two of the better second chance creators in the Big Ten. And Geronimo also healthy, which is why I think Maryland is starting to play a little bit better. I actually, believe it or not, man, I have Maryland power rated close with Wisconsin. I know Maryland's depth is an issue. I know they don't shoot well, but I may be looking to bet Maryland Big Ten futures just because I still really like this team, and they've gotten unlucky, and they have played better away from home than they did last year. So I'm curious if that'll translate to a neutral court-ish at, in Minnesota for the Big Ten tournament. But I really like Maryland in this spot.
Yeah, I think I agree. The issue for Maryland right now, obviously, you go take a look at some of their, 4 factors and the percents they allow on defense, and coming in as a top 6 defense in KenPom is not easy, right? It is a difficult thing to do, especially when you allow the 346th lowest free throw percentage against. So if they can calm down, keeping those hands to themselves a little bit, like the effective field goal percentage is beautiful. Their defensive, at the rim is incredible. Like, they don't allow you to take a lot of threes. They're forcing opponents into like good looks in terms of what, you want on a defense. So yeah, I think, you have something like that, it could definitely come together. The offense is definitely missing. I think they will, have a chance to get out of the first, second round, come tournament time potentially. But there's still something I think a little bit missing. Kevin Willard doing a good job, but that same type of departure against the top seed in the second round of the tournament seems pretty likely in terms of where they're going to end. But I definitely like them in terms of a potential run in a Big Ten conference tournament where we routinely see that like some of the teams with their eyes set forward in the championship can sometimes bow out a little early, and the defense might very well end up winning it for a team in that conference championship. So yeah, I like it. I think it's a good angle. Maryland could definitely surprise some people. I don't think they're expecting to go for, cutting down the nets in Phoenix this year, but they could definitely, surprise a few people in Minnesota.
Yeah, not making my future look too good when it comes back to the preseason.
It happens.
It does. I expected a lot more from Deshaun Harris-Smith and Jamie Kaiser. I know they played a little bit better of late, but still pretty inconsistent. Harris-Smith was a 5-star freshman, and he has been not anything close to that, at least when it comes to his offensive efficiency. But one last thing on the Big Ten, Purdue, I kind of make this conference overall. I think it's a pretty bad Big Ten conference when you look year over year. I don't know how much Purdue is going to want to win the conference tournament title. Obviously, every team wants to win it, but they won it last year trying to make a deep run in when it comes to the actual NCAA tournament. So if they get bounced in the semifinal, okay. Illinois has outperformed expectations playing one of the worst schedules across college basketball. Their best win may be FAU, which has underperformed, at least the public's perception, not our perception as bettors, a little bit of a fluky run to the Final Four. Last year, Wisconsin has struggled of late. Northwestern dealing with the Ty Berry injury. Nebraska, so good at home, not so much on the road. Michigan State is a mess because Tom Izzo keeps favoring his veterans over 5-star freshmen that can actually space the floor. So I really think the league tournament's going to be wide open, man.
I do too. Again, like you said, there's a lot there. You talk about Maryland, and they're going to sit in like the top 50 of a lot of rankings and be in the bottom third of the conference in standings. So yeah, I do think they can get a little momentum rolling. And sometimes you see these teams coming from the first rounds, not getting the buys, starting to feel good, win a few games in a row. Should be fun. We're like 2 days from March. I can't wait. It's gonna be a great couple weeks.